Quick question right out of the gate. So do you scrape your crease sliding from the goal line to the top of the crease, or, as I've seen a few people doing lately, sliding side to side, like post to post? No right or wrong, and unless, of course, you're so deeply tied into your routine that considering a change would totally mess up the universe. Well, I'll ask the guys in a little bit. Welcome to InGoal Radio, the podcast about goaltending, but not specifically for goaltenders. Some great feedback from coaches who are interested in learning about the position, and I believe we have a question or two coming up. I'm Darren Millard. Today, more on that feedback with listener questions. I'm lobbying hard for this to become a regular part of the pod, as I've made it a personal goal to ask the founders of InGoal Mag about something that they can't explain. Stump them, so to speak. David Hutchison in just a little bit, but first, Kevin Woodley recently joined me for some time with Bill Ranford. He is the man with a world championship, a Stanley Cup, and a Conn Smythe trophy on his resume as a player before going on to a two-time Stanley Cup championship career as the goaltending coach with the Los Angeles Kings. One of the more interesting things about Bill is that his style was nothing like how present-day players stop the puck. And style is a word that has such a strong presence in the goaltending vernacular. Here's Bill Ranford on InGoal Radio, the podcast. Take the next step in this journey in talking to goaltenders. Kevin Woodley and Darren Millard chatting with Bill Ranford of the Los Angeles Kings. And Bill, let's start at the very beginning of your goaltending life. And when did you get involved in the position, and what made you want to play goal?
Well, I think it started back when I was a youngster in Cold Lake, Alberta, when my dad was in the military. We had a friend by the name of Derek Searle, who was a goalie, and I think I just became fascinated by the equipment. And, I think it was probably at a Canadian Tire that I got my first set of pads, and remember their blue and white pads that I was down in the basement taking shots at a very young age.
So you were a base brat, born in Brandon, and then traveled around the world. When did you start taking the game seriously, and where was that?
I think I always, that was probably a little bit of my downfall. I think I always approached it seriously. It's something, it's just the way I approach sport in general. I played a lot of baseball growing up, soccer. I think the different thing, the road for me was a little bit different because a major part of my minor hockey was actually played over in Germany. So, with a very small group of kids and having to travel all over Europe in order to play hockey.
So how did you get scouted to come back and play in the Western League?
Well, I basically, it was a little bit of a journey. I came back for my 2 years of Bantam hockey I was in Germany from 74 to 79. And then my first 2 years of Bantam hockey were with the Portage Terriers in Portage. And then we got transferred to Summerside PEI, and that was my first year midget. And back in the the early '80s, there wasn't a lot of guys coming out of the Maritimes, from as far as being scouted. And so it wasn't really till I went back. We transferred the following year to Red Deer, Alberta. I was on the base outside of Red Deer and started playing for the Red Deer Optimist Chiefs, and Dave Manning was the head coach at that time. And back then, we probably worked real hand in hand with Lethbridge in the Western Hockey League. There was a lot of players that were coming out of Red Deer through John Chapman and going into Lethbridge. So I think that's where it probably started, where I started getting recognized, just because a lot of scouts would come see the Red Deer team due to that relationship.
I want to jump in there. The one thing, as sort of more the modern guy in this conversation, or I guess not the young guy, but I wonder about, like, did you ever have a goalie coach back then?
Nope. The goalie coach was my dad. He was the one that used to help me out and keep my game. And but no, I really didn't have a goalie coach till late in my career.
What was it like tutoring yourself then? And how would you get through those ups and downs?
You really relied on your partner. As much as you are in competition with each other, you relied on your partner to for feedback, and you tried to help each other out, and I think that's the thing that's kind of changed. You just don't see that as much anymore. Every team has one goalie coach, if not a head guy and a development guy now, and also the introduction of goalie coaches with most of the CHL teams and your not only your college teams but USHL teams.
Goalies and partners don't really have a reason to talk to each other anymore because they've got so much support.
Well, I think they still have that camaraderie, when they come back to the bench for the drink, and a lot of times they sit beside each other in the dressing room. But you still, there's that union's always going to be there. But as far as maybe that aspect of relying on them for help, I think now that most teams have goalie coach, you don't lean on each other that way as much.
When you look back, what would you have changed about your game, your style, your approach? What would you have told yourself?
Oh boy, it's a difficult question. I'll tell you what, I think the goalie that I was probably due to those sleepless nights when you're trying to figure it out yourself. There was nobody really to lean on but yourself, and that probably made me a stronger goalie. I think you get into situations where sometimes goalies don't grow as much as they should because they use their goalie coach as a little bit of a crutch. And here I am as a goalie coach saying this, but I agree that there's times that you've got to let your goalie just grow on his own a little bit. And so I think that was the positive thing for my career. But I think the negative is there's a lot of nights where I could have used another set of eyes, to pick up on things that maybe was lacking in my game. And I think today the more the understanding of reading the game through video, we didn't have the video to look back at your clips and say, oh boy, that was a bad read there, or what was I thinking there? We didn't have that luxury. The game was over, and a lot of times it was on on your own personal memory what happened, and hoping it happened that way, or you usually had to watch the goals because that's the only thing you'd ever see on highlights were the goals against, and you tried to make your adjustments that way.
Were you nervous? Were you one of those brooders before a game?
I think I was. I wasn't one of those guys that you couldn't talk to. I always felt that the game was hard enough as it was to worry about all these different superstitions. There's no doubt I had a plan going into games of how I needed to be ready to play the game, but I tried not to get too caught up in little things that if everything didn't fall into place, I wasn't going to go out there and play well. I just found the game was tough enough as it was to worry about a ton of superstitious type stuff.
Now, you obviously played the game, Billy, totally different than how it's played now. Can you walk me through the transition from Bill Ranford, the goaltender, to Bill Ranford, the goalie coach?
I think it's one thing that I've always enjoyed is teaching the position. And if you want to be a good teacher, you constantly have to evolve, watch other goalies, watch other goalie coaches and what they're doing, and try and find something that works for you. But once you get to the top level that I'm fortunate enough to be coaching at now, I still miss, the earlier part of my coaching career when I had the extra time for the development and the teaching. And now you certainly get more time with your second guy to work on that teaching component. But your top guy, a lot of it's now done through video, and it's more of maintenance with your top guy. And And that's why, I really still enjoy working with top end guys in the summer, because, that love for teaching is probably the thing that still pushes me each day.
In terms of style, how did you like the modern aspects of the game? Was there anybody that sort of helped you coming out of the league and sort of transitioning into some of the different things in that gap between playing and how the game's played now?
I think it was just, I think first of all, from, a lot of it early on was on my own. I think when I first, the year I retired, I interviewed with Vancouver, and they basically said I didn't have any experience. And, in my mind, I thought, well, I just played 15 years in the league. How could I not have any experience? But the experience that I didn't have was being a coach, being a teacher. And so that transition just happened slowly with working with, the Burnaby / Coquitlam Express in the BC Junior Hockey League. And then where I think my eyes were really opened up was when Dean Chanel, Dean was a Hockey Canada guy, and I just saw the way he organized his practices and the organizational aspect of it. That's where things really changed for me. I started making sure I had practice plans. I started building a drill book, a little bit of a portfolio / drill book and resume. And then the following year, when I joined the Vancouver Giants with Don Hay, I was blown away. I walked into training camp with Don, and Don had everything from day 1 through 20 already ready and raring to go. And so that was another level of learning to be organized, have a plan, and that's where things started to kind of change for me, and learning to be more of a teacher, but also being organized, and just taking a more professional approach to what I was doing.
So what is the foundation of Bill Ranford's goalie teaching?
Probably the same foundation that I had as a player: attention to detail and work ethic. Those are the two major staples of who I am as a goalie coach. And then, number 3 is, obviously you got to start getting into the technical side. But every goalie that joins, whether you want to call it a stable or whatever it is that I've worked with, the number one thing that we always talk about is attention to detail and work ethic. And once we get past that stage, then we move on to, tweaking, some of the technical side. If you look at the guys that have gone through in the 13 years, I'm definitely not a cookie cutter guy. My guys don't play the same. I try and play within their abilities that got them there, because obviously they got to this level for a reason. And then I just try and help them get better. And I have one rule only, and that is, if what they're doing is costing us hockey games, that's when I change them.
When people say Bill Ranford teaches this style, what is this style?
I don't have a style. I don't have one. All my goalies are different. You look at the 4 guys that have come through this year: Peter Budaj, Cal Peterson, Jack Campbell, and Jonathan Quick. They are all different in their own ways. But if the one trait that I want you to see them is that they have detail in their game and their work ethic.
So what's the detail? Take me through the detail, maybe between Quick and Jack, those 2 guys, and where do the details differ?
They don't. The details that I want are hitting your spots. Post save recovery is not lazy. It's up and get to your next spot, take information in. Consistency in your reads. I don't want you to play a guy walking out of the corner 5 different ways. We want to have a consistency, the way we handle playing a guy from back of the net. I want it to be the same every time. Obviously there's going to be slight adjustments here and there, but I want consistency and detail to what they do.
And like you said, Bill, but you don't force them to both do it the same way. And that's where not being a
Correct.
cookie cutter comes in.
Obviously a guy like Jack that's got 3 or 4 more inches on Jonathan Quick in traffic situations is going to look over top more than Jonathan Quick's going to be able to. Jonathan's going to have to sometimes go to phase 2 and looking off the hip just because he's a smaller goalie. Peter Budaj has got to use his knowledge or his experience because he's not a big guy. So we rely on his experience of reading plays and anticipating what's going to happen. Then we've got a guy like Cal Peterson that's new to the league. There's going to be detail in his game, but there's going to be a lot more talking about the opponent that they're facing, the different shooters, just from his lack of knowledge of the league. But all these details, if there's attention to it, is going to make them a consistent goalie versus a roller coaster goalie.
How much of your job as a goalie coach now, Bill, is, been there, done that, the experience, especially for a guy like Cal Peterson or any of them, in fact, just to be able to sort of tap into the knowledge base you have, not just as a guy who played in the league and won cups in the league, but also won cups as a coach? Like, how much do you rely on that experience with these guys?
Well, I mean, the fact that I played and I've been in situations, I think helps. You don't necessarily have to have played in the league, but there's some scenarios where you're going into a game 7 and it doesn't matter how well you've been playing up to that point. There's going to be things that come into your mind that, it's game 7, everybody's watching. It's probably going to jump to another level, because I've gone through it. I can relate. There's games where a guy doesn't play well and just you weren't seeing the puck well. I can relate to nights like that where, there might be a game where you just weren't there, so why are we even looking at video? Let's scratch it. Let's go back to the basics, get our detail in practice. If there's something in the game that had to be corrected, I can still do that verbally. I don't necessarily have to show them on video, but it's just, and sometimes it's a gut feel for me where I feel that, it didn't matter what happened in the game. Your mind wasn't there. So let's throw it away and start over and get back to the good things.
How much a coaching, Bill, has allowed you, we talk about when guys leave the game, they talk about wanting to, stay involved in it. What's the difference between being a coach and being a player? Like, you still get that sort of energy of being a big part of, whether it's a win on a given night or a championship run? Do you still have that same connection?
Nah, you'll never have the same connection. That I think that the toughest thing that you go through is when you're the player. When I was in the net, to a certain extent, I was controlling my own destiny. But as the goalie coach, as soon as they step on the ice, it's out of your hands, and it's frustrating some nights because you go downstairs and everybody, the goalie hasn't played well and everybody's looking at you, but that goes with the territory of being the goalie coach, and it's your job to figure out why they didn't play well. But the bottom line is, as soon as they step onto the ice, there's not a whole lot you can do about it.
Bill, you went through the transition from Boston to Edmonton and stepped right into the Fire. Can you take us through that transition and what it was like to almost immediately be leaned on for a team with championship pedigree?
I mean, it was. I was fortunate enough that when the trade happened to go on the Cup run with going from Boston to Edmonton in '88, and the fortunate thing is Darryl Ray didn't have the opportunity to play a lot that year. Grant played most of the games, but down the stretch, they felt Grant was struggling due to fatigue. So I got to play, 7 or 8 games down the stretch. So it gave me an opportunity to play in front of, guys that I somewhat idolized when I lived in Red Deer as a midget. But it also taught me, the level of compete and professionalism that this organization had. And then on the, step 2 of it, to go through a Stanley Cup run and understand the highs and lows you go through in a Stanley Cup run. That was probably the greatest lessons I learned. So when I, was thrown into the fire 2 years later, I was somewhat prepared, from seeing it. Living it was a whole other story, but at least I was prepared to understand that there are going to be highs and lows in a playoff run. From game to game, from series to series, there's going to be some ups and downs, and the guys that don't get too high and don't get too low are the guys that are usually the most successful.
So how was it, or how different was it when you were actually living it compared to what you thought it was like, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, the pressure. We started off in that Winnipeg series where we were expected to win, and the probably the dealing with the media is until you played in a Canadian city and have dealt with the media in a Canadian city, that's the biggest obstacle that you're going to have to deal with when you're expected to win.
We apologize for that.
No, there's no. Hey, that goes along with the business of being a professional athlete. There's nothing to apologize about it, and it's just a fact that that's what you have to deal with as a professional athlete. Some guys handle it well, and some guys don't.
Is that part of the gig now? Like, just I maybe not quite the same spotlight in LA, but certainly there was when you guys were on cup runs. Is helping these guys deal with not so much how they deal with it, but just how to manage it, how to make sure you approach it the right way.
Oh, for sure. We had very little on our 2 runs with LA. Especially the first one. We had very, very little, let alone playoff experience, or even NHL final experience. That's the one thing that I learned right off the bat. Until you've played in a Stanley Cup final, you have no idea the pressure. There's the first round, there's the second, there's the third, and it increases as each round goes. But until you've been in the spotlight and played in the final, you have no idea. It is a whole new animal when you get to that point where you're dealing with pressure. Every single move you make is under a microscope to the whole world, because it's one thing playing in a Canadian city where there's a lot more media, to where you go on the world stage where everybody is watching and every mistake you make is scrutinized. That's a whole nother level of pressure that you have to learn to deal with.
In your Conn Smythe year, maybe they did from the very start, but did you feel that the team trusted you where you hit that point where it was, yeah, they're all in on me, or was it a gradual buildup?
Well, it was interesting because we got pounded in the first game, and I didn't play very well. And obviously we got down in the series 3-1. But a thing that John Muckler did that after we got pounded, he came in the next day, and it's basically, you're our guy. We're not changing. You're going to be our guy. And they put a video on with kind of a montage of save after save of what I'd accomplished that year. And, basically it was kind of a rallying point where, listen, if we're gonna do anything, this is going to be the guy that's going to do it for us.
And that was in front of the whole team?
That was in front of the whole team, and it was and I'm a young guy, and we had guys with 4 Stanley Cups under their belt already in that group, and it was a little bit of a defining moment for me where it's like basically and I can say this now, my main goal was to prove the media wrong. That's where my focus changed. I wanted to prove that I deserved to be there, and in a quiet manner throughout the rest of the playoffs, I wanted to prove to myself, my teammates, and the media that jumped on me after that first game that where's Grant Fuhr, and they can't win without Grant Fuhr, and that was my rallying point, and that was my teammates' rallying point. I played 60 some games that year and proven that I could play in the league, and then it's stage 2. You have to prove that you can do it in the playoffs.
Well, that's a great story. And have you ever gone to that card or played that card as a coach, Bill, or talked to a head coach? Because I think one thing that the general fans might underestimate is just how important, and I think the media underestimates it too, not that it's necessarily our job, but when you have a guy that he and the rest of the room believes that he is that guy, amidst sometimes a lot of questions from the outside, just how much that means to the guy between the pipes sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's I remember in our I'm not gonna name names, but person will know who I'm talking about, and we had a private conversation about it. But in the finals, because we won the first couple of games, the whole focus was on how to beat Jonathan Quick, and I felt that was unfair, but that was the storyline. And so, what sells is a great storyline of this young guy coming out of nowhere and dominating, but they kept trying to poke holes in his game, and there was nothing said about Marty Brodeur at that time. And so from my standpoint, I was just trying to defend our guy, and the answer that I got was, hey, this is what our people want, and if it starts sliding the other way, we're going to start going after the other guy. But I just felt in the moment it should have been equal, trying to poke holes in both guys, not just one when it's down to the final 2 goalies. But that wasn't the storyline. So I had to bite my tongue and be humble about it, and try and keep my guy going and win their first Stanley Cup in 40 plus years.
Did you talk to Quickie about that during that period as well?
No, the thing that I tried to, just because I did have the experience of going through a few Stanley Cup runs, obviously with Edmonton and then again with Washington, was I tried to deflect any media aspect of things away from him as much as possible. He was the quiet guy with the hood on that didn't say a lot, and that's the storyline that everybody wanted to know what kind of guy he was, and you know what, he was just that quiet guy, and that's the way we wanted to have it.
Nobody makes heel down, toe up saves anymore, like you.
Obviously, I've been watching me practice lately. I still got it. Same thing.
I was going to ask you,
no,
I know you stepped out on the ice. How much old school comes out when you got to fill in practice?
All old school. I try not to go down because it's too hard to get back up.
The current modernization of the goal equipment, just your take on it, and how much do you agree with it, or do you not agree with it?
I think I love the weight of the new equipment. I love the protection of the new equipment with the high density foam. Guys really don't have a lot of these young guys coming up now really don't have an idea of how much that puck hurts and used to hurt in the old equipment. But I also feel that there's a couple of things, the art of catching a puck is gone that I know they're now looking at. I hate the idea that I love the glove save. I hate the idea of two blockers. I think that's something that there is probably going to be the next stage that they address. And I still think I do not like the from the chest on up on the chest protectors. I still believe they're way too big.
Just on the glove save part of it, Bill, people had to learn how to catch the puck because if you didn't catch it in the pocket, it hurt too much.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, that is a big thing. Well, and the problem is it used to take us, 4 months to break in a new glove, and then when it finally broke in, it would hurt for the next two months after that to catch the puck. But now guys are, some guys are changing gloves every month or every 3 weeks. It's just completely changed, and I think because the gloves have become so light, the protection isn't as great. So these guys have gone to practice gloves, and then I think the introduction of the beefed up practice gloves is where we've kind of transitioned into the double blocker, where all of a sudden the guys were getting hurt with the beefed up glove that wouldn't close, and now you got guys that are using those gloves that they're going lighter weight, but they won't close, and it's just like the guys using two blockers.
So how do you handle that as a coach? Do you try and talk to your guys out of that?
I try. I want my guys to, it's the Daryl Sutter school. He wants his goalie to take a whistle as much as he can, and so I want our guys to catch the puck and stop the play and reload and get our guys organized. And so yeah, it's always a topic. But when guys are starting out and Bantam hockey on up and they're using these new style gloves that don't close, it's hard to get guys to change.
You talked, Bill, earlier about enjoying the summertime and the development time. Because, I know, as you said, talking to goalie coaches around the league, it really is about maintenance for your top guys with such little practice time in a season. When you get on the ice with some of the younger kids, is there anything or any advice you could give to goalie parents or maybe youth coaches about how we get back to active hands and making glove saves?
I think as far as, the summer development, I for me, the biggest thing is kids have gone hockey 24/7 and they've gotten away from playing other sports, playing soccer, playing baseball. I mean, I would, the biggest thing why I caught the puck and used my hands way more than you may see goalies today is I played baseball and you used your hands and it was just more natural to catch the puck from playing baseball. And I just wish kids would take a little bit more time off in the summer, play other sports, be an athlete, because I think that's the thing that you're seeing that's starting to change more in the goaltending position. The rules aren't allowing this blocking type goalie anymore. You have to be athletic, and the way you become athletic is to play other sports. And that's one thing that I talk to young kids about. Get out there, try other things, become an athlete. And then, as you get closer to your season starting up, then you start getting back into it. There's lots of goalie schools and that sort of things that you can attend to sharpen yourself up. But I still believe that the top guys, in the league now are athletes. And that's one thing you got to focus on a little bit more.
Do you want to be a head coach, or are you
Me?
really? Yeah,
No.
or are you really?
No.
That's why not?
I you know what? For me, you've got to have a little bit of a hard edge to you to be a head coach. You got to be the hammer. And I don't know if that's in my personality. I've got an edge to me, like, with my goalies, and especially as guys are coming up, I'm going to be hard on them. But I just don't know if I have it in my DNA to be that hammer that head coaches have to have. And I'm not going to lie, I enjoy, it gets relied on in my position as the goalie coach / assistant coach with the Kings. Is, I think, just because I've been through so much with this group, and as a player, I'm a guy that they can use to talk to, and I'm not going to go, running to the coach or running to the general manager and they said this. I've got I try and have that trust of the players that I'm going to get their message across of what they want to the head coach or to management in order to better our team.
That's a great answer, because there's so many people who are trying to climb the ladder, and the head coach is the be all end all, and not enough people just enjoy doing what they're really good at.
Yeah, I enjoy what I do. I mean, there's a lot of tough nights, and that's tough being away from the family as much as I am. That part has been really hard, but you still gotta want to learn, and you still gotta love the job. And I don't know if I would as head coach. I see what the head coaches that I've coached with go through. At this point in my life, I think due to the fact that I was a goalie for 15 years in the NHL, that pressure, I don't think I want to go through that pressure again. And I think that's what the head coach probably has that one-on-one pressure like a starting goalie, and I just don't know if I'd want to go through that again.
Billy, do you have a favorite save?
Well, that's obviously, I have a favorite save, and it was probably what I was known for. To stack the pads is probably one of my favorites of my time, and obviously, you can never argue with a great glove save.
Yeah, and
you just don't. The glove save, the old splits glove save that you don't see anymore, and a good stack are probably two of my favorites. Not going to lie.
I love it.
Nice.
Thanks for doing this, pal.
Nice.
From Brandon to Summerside, two of my favorite places on the planet, and the West Coast as well. You got it covered, man.
Yeah, coast to coast and over to Europe. Got her all covered.
There you go. Billy, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Bill.
No problem.
Billy's gone off to dinner on this road trip. They'll be on the road whether you're listening to this 3 weeks from when we recorded that thing. It's such a extensive road trip. But Woody, just your takeaway from that interview that started from when Billy was a young kid and continued right through his goaltending coaching days.
To me, it's the Muckler video, and sort of going into that room and making sure that everyone knew that Bill Ranford was their guy. I see it so often, even up to the NHL. We hear coaches go with a win and you're in philosophy when you've got two guys playing well, or make public statements in the media about maybe not, having complete faith in the backup, and then maybe not playing him as often. Like, what you present publicly and how you sort of define those roles, how you sort of treat your goaltender, like, confidence matters. It mattered to Bill Ranford. It allowed him to, dig out of that hole, not worrying that the next goal could be his last goal. To me, anything you do as a coach, as a head coach, that undermines that ability as a goaltender is a negative. And it amazes me that even in the NHL today, we see head coaches still kind of do that, undermine their goaltending, and then wonder why things don't go well as a result. So if it works at the NHL level in a negative fashion, imagine what it does if you're doing to your kid in bantam or peewee, or heaven forbid, even lower down the chain.
And it's a process, right? Because John Muckler shows that video. The series didn't turn around then. Edmonton was down 3-1 in that set after the Dave Ellett overtime goal, and then Billy found his rhythm. So it took a while for everything to come together.
Well, and that buys him time, right? Like, he's not going into each game worried that one more bad performance is the end, because he's got that confidence. It allows him to sort of dig out from under that hole, because he's not worried about the next goal being the last goal. He's able to just kind of keep plodding along because he's been given the faith that he's the guy.
Let's bring in your co-founder of InGoal magazine, Dave Hutchison, who joins us now. Hutch, play off of what you heard from Billy.
For me, it was the attention to detail. It's the second week in a row now we've heard a professional talk about the importance of the details. Thatcher Demko, of course, talking about making sure you've got 5 good reps and then get out. And I think Billy, when asked about his style, said really it's about the details for his goaltenders. And how often do we see in younger goaltenders, even junior goaltenders, how fast can I get through this series of movements? Play so many reps through that you're playing poorly and not at your best. And the old adage is practice makes perfect, but I actually think it's practice makes permanent. So if you're not doing good reps, you're just getting really good at doing poor reps. And so nice to see that's what the pros are doing. And I think it's a great lesson for minor hockey goalies, for coaches. Kevin?
Yeah, no, practice makes permanent. Perfect practice makes perfect is another one that we've heard from our old friend Mitch Korn over time. I think part of that goes to head coaches in terms of setting up drills that allow your goaltenders to perform the way you expect them to perform in a game. If you're rushing them from one rep to the other, you can't expect them to keep up and still maintain the form that they want in a game. I think some of it goes to the goaltenders too, and we heard that from Demko. When Billy talked about his transition, not getting the Canucks job, even though he'd had all this success between the pipes, part of what he did was sort of go to school on the modern game. He worked a little bit with Ian Clark, who's now the Canucks goaltending coach, and we've seen him instill that in Thatcher Demko, and in Jacob Markstrom. Big part of his season this year is sort of learning, ironically, at the age of 29-30, what it really takes to be a pro. And one of those lessons is always making sure you're having good reps, that 5 good reps are canceled out if the next 5 suck or you do them sort of half-assed. And the importance of those details is something I think we'll hear from top goaltenders right on through as we continue having these discussions around the league.
Okay, interaction with goaltending and the community has been a staple of you guys at InGoal since the inception of the magazines, and that carries over to the podcast. And we've got questions from the audience. And the first one, I'm going to ask 2 here because one just jumped into my mind. From the age of Pee-wee up, and you guys talk about good reps and focusing on the right things in practice. How do you balance that? And I'll start with Hutch, because you have a son playing the position. How do you balance that between trying to stop every puck in practice to making the saves the right way? Because I've heard from goaltenders and players say he hated getting scored on in practice. That was such a staple of Dominik Hasek. And then you've got the other side of it where you want to work on good habits. So Hutch?
Sort of 2 answers. I've been lucky enough to work with a number of coaches that are willing to work with the goaltending coach and realize that a lot of things that aren't good for the goaltenders on the ice actually aren't really good for the players either. You've got to set up a situation where things are game-like for everybody. And if you're ripping through flow drills at too high a rate of speed, you're not duplicating what's happening in a game either for the players. So, things like chopping off the end of a drill by not going to the net and going after a rebound because the next players have to come in. That's not good habits for the players either. They've got to finish their reps properly. So I think those things really support goaltender development. But yeah, goaltending is a mental game for everybody, even at the youngest levels. And you've got to work with your kids so that you can establish some success in practice. So whether it's focus on a particular challenging shooter and be sure that's the guy that you're gonna stop if things are coming a little too quick for everybody else. Focus on a particular skill that you're working on at that moment. But, I still do believe that a well-run practice for goalies and players makes it possible for both to be successful.
And we've heard this from the NHL guys over the years as well, Hutch. A little bit of both. Like, if you're working on something new, if these rush drills are coming too fast and too frequent for you to reset, the goaltender just has to take the mindset of, okay, I'm skipping this one. Like, you got an empty net, will I reset for the next one? Because these rush drills are coming just way too fast for me to keep up with. We've heard that from guys like Jimmy Howard. At the same time, goalies can't get too demanding that everything be tailored to them. There's a danger in that as well. And we heard that from Carter Hutton last year, if you remember Hutch at InGoal Mag. We ran a 5-part series with him. And the one thing that he thought was sometimes we get into too much of his words, goalie school mindset as goaltenders, where, yeah, okay, practice isn't ideal, but it also can't always be the other way, where it's always just a drill where you know exactly where it ends and where that shot is coming from. That's what he means by goalie school mindset.
100%. Yeah.
That's where he says he focuses on some of his technique, but he recognizes the importance of getting outside of that technique, and sometimes that's just battling through some of those drills in practice. And I think part of this for younger goalies is, the tough situation is the coach wants you to try on everything, and you're building bad things. I don't know about speaking up as a young guy. I'm not playing in Pee Wee anymore, so I don't know how that works. But at the pro level, they really feel it's important for them to, almost find that balance within themselves. When do they go out and compete? When do they have to just let one go in because it's not doing them any good? But it's easy for them to do because they've been doing it for a lot longer.
Well, sure. And, it is hard for a young kid to speak up, and God forbid, goalie parents out there, please don't you go be talking to the coach about how to structure his practices for your kid. That's not going to help anybody. But for me, it's also finishing off every one of those drills. So if a player comes in, takes a shot, peels away from the net so the next guy can come in quick with the second rep, that's not a good habit for a player too. So if a coach were to reinforce that every rep has to finish off by following those rebounds, you lose the goalie school mentality at the end of that drill, which is good, and the players learn good habits, Kev.
Well, and I would say that this is one more thing. If maybe you don't want the goalie parents going and talking to the coaches, but I would argue this. If we structure practices around game situations, which we agree is better for goaltenders in general,
For sure.
the way to sell that to coaches who maybe aren't willing to change some of their old school ways is it's going to be better for your players too. And I've seen this up to the NHL level because there are bad practices in the NHL. We have NHL goalies that tell us all the time, practice builds bad habits for me because it's crappy practice. So it's a problem right up to the top level. But the reality is if you pitch it, and I've seen this, some minor hockey organizations have done this successfully, there's no point. These shots that are unrealistic for goaltenders, they're unrealistic for players too. We see practices at the NHL where guys will take 10 shots with time and space from spots they won't get all season or maybe once in a season. Why are you spending 90% of your practicing shots that only take place, 2% of the time in game situations? You will get better goaltenders and you will get better players if you structure it around a more realistic game scenario. Nothing in the slot, nothing through the middle wide open.
Hutch, love your comment about just picking a guy. If you're doing the horseshoe drill or a flow drill, whatever, just pick one guy that you're going to focus on stopping, and the rest almost go through the motions. Great start to the viewer interaction and listener interaction. Really too bad that you guys didn't have much to say on that. Let's get to our listeners, and this one comes in to @InGoal Media. I love the podcast. Keep up the good work. One of you mentioned the best pegs for beer league. Can you tell me what they are? I've missed the answer. Thank you. Woody?
Yeah, no, I use Anchor Pegs, and you can find them online. They're a company, they're based out of the east coast of Canada, I believe Halifax or in the Maritimes, your neck of the woods, Darren. They developed originally a peg where the bottom two metal pieces, which are kind of like sharp edge screws with grooves in them, they were fixed. Now they have adjustable ones. They've expanded the line several times over. They were the first one I got introduced to, and frankly, I've facilitated or sold them to probably half a dozen to 10 NHL teams where I had their product at the rink, and the NHL goalie coaches, I showed it to them, and they ended up purchasing it. And for the most part, they like it. They are a little pricey. I will say that. I've gotten to the point now, though, I can't even go into a beer league game. I bring my own pegs because you just say to the referees, listen, you're not gonna have to deal with me knocking the net off all game. You're not gonna have to get angry and call stupid penalties that shouldn't be penalties. I can play goal the way I've learned to play goal, and that includes leveraging in and out of my posts. To me, it's worth it. I bring 2 sets. I ask the other goalie if he wants it. If we're switching ends, it's great. But they are a little pricey. They're like close to 160 Canadian per set. There are some cheaper alternatives out there. I haven't tried them yet. The Piranha pegs by Bandits Goaltending have a 3-prong system. Like I said, we haven't used them. I love the anchor pegs myself, but Jeff Saleko was here with the Detroit Red Wings last week. Or a couple weeks ago, they had to practice at Burnaby 8 Rinks, which is a facility that doesn't have marsh pegs, NHL game pegs drilled in. So he brought his own, and they were the Piranha pegs, and he really likes those ones, and they are a lower price point. So those are 2 I'd take a look at. Like I said, good experiences all around for me with the anchor pegs. But if you're looking for maybe a cheaper alternative, I believe the Piranha ones are a lower price point.
That question from Mark. Here's question number 2. What is a good age for a young goaltender to really start specializing and engaging in goalie-specific training? Minor hockey teams rarely have a goalie-specific coach, so to advance in a skill, a private goalie coach is almost necessary. I understand that a variety of activities paramount in developing an athlete, but is there an age when a kid may have missed the boat in terms of developing a goaltender that can make it to midget AAA or the collegiate level? That's from Kenneth in Montreal. Hutch, take that one.
So many layers to that question and so many things to address. First off, I think never too young to start learning the position and learning the basic skills of the position. For sure, in some areas, the kids don't have the support they'd like, but I think it's entirely possible for regular coaches to learn some of those basic skills to work with the youngest kids. Hockey Canada now has a curriculum to support coaches to be able to work with their goaltenders. And absolutely, as young as possible, start working on those basic skating skills, basic movement skills. Those have to be repped in at a fairly young age if you can. Specializing, though, is a whole nother question. And one we've talked about, Kevin, a whole pile. But I really don't believe that a goaltender should be forced to specialize too young. Unfortunately for us, out here on the West Coast, at least around the Atom level, if a kid is playing rep hockey, they're forced to choose, and I think that's too young. Both because kids shouldn't be forced to make a decision where they might enjoy playing both sides. They continue to develop their game skills, continue to develop their skating skills as a forward. And gosh, it's just terrible to see a 10-year-old kid pinned to the bench for half the games as well. So I wish we didn't force kids to specialize, and I don't think you should have to. And then the other side is, when have you missed the boat? Gosh, that's a tough question as well. But I can tell you that at a rate around age 12, 13, you can see some you start to see the kids coming together. Those kids that were really standing out as 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. The other kids who didn't get as early a start are definitely catching up. And Kevin, I know we've talked about some NHL goaltenders that they got to start fairly late, 12, 13 years of age, and still made it to the show.
Yeah, and I think one of the keys here is you can start early, but how long before you should only be doing that? And I think that's where the answer kind of changes. We heard that from Billy Ranford, right? Like, play other sports. And I know it's easier to say than it is to do. Hutch, you're living that right now. There's not a lot of time with all the demands, even at a young age. But physical literacy matters. And anytime you have an opportunity, I mean, honestly, the one thing that bugs me the most about having to have 2 goaltenders in rep hockey at way too young an age in Canada is the fact the second goalie can't go out and play as a forward. We've heard it from Braden Holtby, both in InGoal magazine and in private conversations I've had with him over the years about how important it was for him that his dad wouldn't let him just be a goaltender until he was 13 years old. He was able to play out. Alex Stalock, I had a conversation with him recently about the same thing. He talks about how blessed he was in Minnesota that the minor hockey organization he played for allowed him to also skate as a forward. He skated as a forward, played a game in Bantam as a forward, and he's in the NHL as a goaltender. And what these guys all tell you is when we talk about goalie school goalies and getting into that preset puck goes here, 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 I move this way, that way mentality, playing as a forward allows you to sort of develop that innate ability to sort of read the patterns of the game and see it from the other side. And whether it's Holtby or Stalock or other goalies, they believe they're in the NHL now in part because they were able to continue to play as a forward. And I think forcing two goalies on kids as young as 9 and 10, and so one's on the bench and one's on the ice, and robbing of them of that opportunity, there's an opportunity cost for those goalies. I get it. I get why they do it. I just don't always agree with it.
Well, the flip side is, I mean, there's a lot of kids who want to play goal, and if you pick one goalie on a team, somebody else is not playing at as high a level as they could, and we got to be fair to them. One thing I wish we would do out here that is not permitted by BC Hockey is if a kid is a rep goaltender, wouldn't it be nice if he could play as a forward on a house team? And because he probably doesn't have the skill to skate as a forward on the rep team, as I can say that about my son. Or we want to develop more goaltenders. How about we let one of our rep forwards go play goal in house league?
Yeah.
That's maybe an interesting compromise. I know schedules make those things really hard, but if it's about the kids and about developing them, I think we should be flexible.
And one thing to be, I don't say careful of, I have a friend locally who coaches as an assistant coach on a bench with his son's team. Son's not a goaltender, but he played in the NHL and as a goaltender. And so he watches his kids come out of, you talk, the listener talked to, or the reader or listener, do we call them readers or listeners, guys? They talked,
Both.
They talked about in the question about goalie specific training. Well, in this case, he watches the goalies come out of their goalie specific training, and they get into games and they're just absolutely glued to their posts in reverse VH. And these kids can he's asking them, so where'd you learn that? Oh, it's all we worked on the whole time at our weekly training session with the local goalie school who comes out and runs the weekly training session. Well, these kids should still be working on their skating, and they're working on advanced techniques on the post, and there's nothing advanced about them if you can't move in and out of them and don't have the edge work to manage them, and it just creates bad habits. So, sometimes it can be a bad thing. I guess the emphasis would be skating. It's all about mobility and movement. To me, at that young an age, it's the goalie coaches that stress those things: competing, skating, and aren't worried about making sure the parents like it, that their kids learning an advanced technique, frankly, before they're ready for it.
Next question comes from Thomas in Calgary. How common is it for pro goaltenders to spray or apply lubricant to the inside of their pads to aid in sliding? Water repellents are often discussed as something that can be applied to the inside of a pad. For example, like Scotch Guard or heavy-duty water repellent is a popular one to aid in sliding, and I've always wondered if pro goaltenders sometimes do the same thing. Woody?
I think mostly the answer is no, because most of them are they have newer equipment, newer pads, and this is something that companies have been on for a little while now. I think Bauer led the charge with their Odin line, with a new material that slides better on its own, doesn't need a lubricant. We've seen CCM follow suit with the speed skin, which we're now seeing NHL guys adopt. Pekka Rinne wearing speed skin on his pads this year. Interestingly enough, a trend that starts at retail and is followed at the NHL. Brian's with their Primo, almost like an advanced weave on the inside edge, slides better. And then guys in the NHL who just feel like they don't want to slide any better, like they like the control of what they have now. I don't know any guys that are spraying stuff on their pads on the regular basis. I think a lot of people caught Henrik Lundqvist spraying something on his pads at the All-Star game a couple of years ago. So I asked him about it last year, and we'll listen to what he said.
Oh yeah, water. A lot of water. I don't like the gear being dry. I like it soft.
That's just a personal preference you've always had?
Not always, but last couple of years. I don't like when the equipment doesn't move with me. So when it's dry, I feel like a robot. And that's why I like it soft. And
So you just spray a little?
everything. Arm and chest, pins, pads. When it sits in the room, it gets so crisp.
Yeah. Well, it's like the beer.
I used to like it dry. Now I like it soft. So you change over the years, I guess.
You evolve.
Yeah.
You're always evolving. So there you go. I think a lot of people on the internet, a lot of sort of, for lack of a better term, Instagram type goalie accounts, thought that Henrik was spraying something to make his pads slide better. Well, guess what? Henrik loves how his pads slide. He's been a big part of the innovation with Bauer that's kind of led this charge to pads that do move better, that produce more active rebounds. And for him, it's just all about a feel. And you heard it right there. Like his chest and arm, everything. It's just water, guys. There's nothing fancy in the bottle.
Well, I've heard of guys putting like ski wax on their pads. Guys that are men's league that haven't bought pads in the last 5, maybe 10 years, and they put ski wax on their pads just to aid in the sliding. So, what your just reaction to that, Hutch?
I think a lot of professional skiers would tell you better have the right wax technician to pick out the right wax for the conditions. Gosh, so much emphasis on sliding, and if you watch a game today or a game 5 years ago, and most goaltenders are trying to beat every shot on their feet. Because if you beat it on your feet and you get set, you're ready to make a stop. And those slides are more for emergency situations, if you ask me, Kev.
Yeah, and hey, listen, I don't mean to dismiss that option, Darren, at the beer league level, but the question was obviously directed towards, do NHL guys do this?
Right.
I think we've seen Hutch, you mentioned Passaw as a company that has a product you can spray on your pad. So if you're using a pad, like we're blessed at InGoal, right? We get new equipment all the time to test from these companies, so we get the latest and the greatest, and the slide's the best stuff. If you don't have that luxury, it sounds like there are materials out there that you can spray on an old-fashioned Gen Pro that's going to allow you to slide better. Like, goalies have been doing this forever, too, at the NHL level. Not the spray, but the materials that slide better. We saw goaltenders use Weave, which is kind of like basically an early edition of Speed Skin, an early edition of the Primo. Bauer's is totally different, but those are sort of similar types of materials. You could have Weave on your pads for a different texture. Some goalies would put Weave on the inside edge so that they would slide better. I think Corey Schneider, like right back in his first days with the Canucks, had it on there. The difference is, for those of us buying at retail, Weave tends to wear a little faster. NHL guys obviously don't care. They get pads whenever they want them. And that's why companies went out and found materials like Speed Skin, like the Primo, that have the same qualities in terms of sliding better, but aren't going to break down as fast as a Weave might.
Come a long way from how much oil do you put on your glove when you break in the GP21 or GM21, whatever it was back in the day. Oh, one final one for you. This is the one I asked right off the very top of the show. When you guys scrape your crease, do you do it top to bottom towards the goal line, or you go side to side like on the posts?
I'm
just throwing
anymore.
that one at you.
I don't even.
You don't scrape anymore?
No.
Really?
No.
I have to, because I'm using the Bauer 2S Pro and it slides better, so I need to scrape it to slow myself down. Because between my inabilities and how lightning fast those pads are, I'd go sliding right out of the frame. I believe that actually happened when I played in the Canucks Autism Network tournament last week. Chris Higgins on a breakaway. He undressed me so badly that I was worried about photos or video being produced on just how. But then I realized I wouldn't have even been in the frame because he went this way and I went that way. And I think by the time he tucked it into an open net, I was in the right face-off circle. I'm going to blame the good sliding pads and not the fact that NHL guys are just that much bloody better. But yeah, they definitely do make a difference. So
So do you scrape back to front or side to side?
I go side to side. I just like
post to post.
Boards. No, not post to post. So like side to side, like I'm cutting across the crease side to side.
All right. People do the Forsberg goal. Guys slide right into the corner, and they're not even in the net. Nice job on the listener inbox. You guys obviously have some passion and some real ideas there, and I want to do this more often if you guys are open to it. So okay.
Always good talking goaltending.
Yeah, we just got to we got to hit the abbreviate button on Woodley.
Okay, we can get that little light, not a red light, but we'll bring in a light. There is Hutch and Woody, and we're welcoming you to send us your feedback and your questions about goaltending, whether you're a goaltending coach, whether you're a head coach, or whether you're a goaltender or a goaltending parent. Thanks for listening. We appreciate everything that you do to support the InGoal Radio podcast. I'm Darren Millard. Make sure you keep your heel down and your toe up.